Hello, this is Brian Rowe, and I'm doing my first MTG deck tech. I'm a casual player that likes to play competitive control-based decks. I play pretty much all formats from Legacy and Modern on back to Vintage and Standard. Today we're going to be looking at a Standard deck that I call Super ESP. It's a combination between Super Friends and Esper, although it's more on the Esper side than on the Super Friends. Esper is a control blue, white, black deck, and Super Friends plays heavy Planeswalkers. So let's take a look at the deck here and walk our way through it. So the first area that we're going to look at is kind of the star cards that are in the deck, which is Lingering Souls. This is often the major win condition early on when paired later with Sorin, which we're going to take a look at. This is an incredible card in all formats that it's available to play in. It's very important also for stabilizing the game early. Often played on turn 3 and then flashed back on turn 4. Curse of Death Holds. I've got two of those in here. They're more on the control side. They're wonderful against Invisible Stalkers or any heavy creature deck. They also take out a lot of the creature mana sources. I have kind of a mixed reaction on these. They're great versus Delver, although the casting cost is 5, so I had a little trouble stabilizing the game to get up to where I could cast one to lock Delver out. The other cards that are in here for creature control is this suite, which includes, let's take a look, 2 Tragic Slips and 1 Doomblade. I went with the Doomblade because it also hits your Inkmoth Nexus. Tragic Slip is just beautiful in conjunction with Lingering Souls. You can often attack or block with the Lingering Souls, then you'll end up with one of them dying, and then it allows you to trigger the -13/-13 on the Tragic Slip. I've also got Day of Judgment here. Day of Judgment is very strong board wipe in the environment and lets you stabilize. The other nice thing about Day of Judgment in this deck is that all of your super friends, Sorin, Liliana, Gideon, all stay in play. The control side of this deck is a little bit lighter than I'm used to playing. I'm used to playing more of an old school draw, go, or heavy control suite. I've only had 2 Snapcasters and 3 Mana Leaks in the main deck. I would have liked to have had another Mana Leak in several of the games. Also have Think Twice and Forbidden Alchemy. A little light on the card draw here also. I think that in looking at this deck again, I may up the number of Think Twices to 3, maybe 4. Moving on to the Super Friends. We have Gideon, which is incredible against creatures. Liliana, which is very strong against non-token creature decks. And this is the guy I really underestimated, was Sorin, Lord of Innistrad. And I've got 3 copies of him in here. I strongly am considering putting a 4th one in the sideboard. In many games, Sorin was just amazing in conjunction with the Lingering Souls, and the reason being is that this second ability that he has, the +2 here, allows Sorin to put out a +1/+0 emblem, and that emblem turns the Lingering Souls into a beatdown force, along with his own vampires that he drops out, and the vampires have lifelink, so you can start to get some life back also. The other win conditions that I put into this deck are Consecrated Sphinx, Wormcoil Engine, and Batterskull. I was happy with the Consecrated Sphinx and the Batterskull. Is a little questionable over the Wormcoil. At 6 casting cost, it worked really well with Day of Judgment, but it was often a turn farther behind than I wanted to be when I was really low on life. The other things that I've got in here that are a little bit outside of what you normally see in an Esper deck or Super Friends is I have 1 Drownyard. This card was amazing against control. Drownyarding myself, getting my Think Twices and my Forbidden Alchemies in the graveyard was amazing card advantage. 1 Sword of Feast and Famine and 1 Sword of War and Peace. These were wonderful to put on a Lingering Souls. I could often drop them on 3rd turn versus a non-counter deck and have them up and running on Lingering souls on 4th or 5th turn. The War and Peace, I ended up holding a lot of cards in hand throughout the game and allowed me to turn the game around for damage and life pretty quickly. I like the combination of the swords with the souls. Also works really well with Sorin. One timely reinforcements in here. This deck was more. This is more to deal with burn or some of the wolf type decks. I may be pulling the timely reinforcements. I really like the lingering souls better, and Sorin, although it works really well to get 3 creatures with Sorin. 1 Ratchet Bomb here to help deal with Delvers and other token-based decks. I was happy with it overall, but I may be considering removing that. The land suite is pretty simple here. We've got the division of basic lands, islands, plains, and swamps. This is one of my favorite plains. It's got the kangaroo there. It's from APAC lands. The other swamp over there is from Portal 1, and it's one of the earlier times when they used that single mana symbol. But moving on to the deck, one of the things that I liked that I've added recently is Evolving Wilds into this deck. I think I have to credit LSV and Channel Fireball for mentioning how powerful Evolving Wilds is in the standard environment. The reason being is that it lets you go get one of these basic lands, and then your Drowned Catacombs, Glacial Fortresses, and Isolated Chapels all come into play untapped. Given the power of this, it really equalizes how useful the Drowned Catacombs and Glacial Fortresses are to the Scars lands, which come into play tapped after turn 3. And in looking at the land, I may actually be pulling one of those Darkslick Shores for another Glacial Fortress or Drowned Catacomb, because late game on turn 4 or turn 5, and I've got some higher casting cost stuff in here, I would have much rather had a land that came into play untapped. Last area that we want to look at with this deck is the sideboard. I think this is one of my weaker areas, is the sideboard currently. For Graveyard, we've got Surgical Extractions, which were just beautiful. For a control matchup, I've got a Dissipate and a Karn in there. I've also got an extra Ratchet Bomb, a Day of Judgment to go up to 4 Day of Judgments, a Corrosive Gale, although that also really hits all of my creatures. The Sever the Bloodline, Phantasmal Images I was very happy with, especially when playing them against Geist. Just think the ability to have a 2-drop that can Legends rule out a hexproof creature is incredible. Revoke Existence I was very happy with because it exiles target artifact or enchantment. The Spell Bomb, I actually much rather would have had more Surgical Extractions than the Spell Bomb. And it's kind of a holdover from when this used to be a Solar Flare deck, because then you'd have the ability to bring it back with a Sun Titan, but without that ability to recur it, I think Spell Bomb is just not as good as Surgical Extraction in this deck. Finally, Celestial Purge has a lot of potential, although I did not play against any zombies. I didn't actually end up siding this card in. I think if I was going to redo this sideboard, I would add in 1 or 2 Despises and maybe a Go for the Throat for more creature control very early on, and pull out the Corrosive Gale, maybe the Ratchet Bomb and the Nihilist Spell Bomb. But overall, I was very happy with how this deck did. The strong points of the deck are really the ability to stabilize early with Lingering Souls, and then possibly board wipe with Day of Judgment, and then get your Planeswalkers into play. Well, I hope you enjoyed this MTG deck tech. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or leave comments. I look forward to hearing ideas, and I'll probably be playing this deck again in the coming weeks and working on improving it. Thanks, this was Brian Rowe for MTG Deck Tech.